In the Vietnam War, Specialist Carter was in trouble, and he knew it. He was walking in front of the platoon because 2 soldiers got sick the day before. Now he had to lead the way through a part of the jungle where other American patrols had been attacked that same week. Everyone was scared, even if no one said it out loud. Carter held his repaired M14 close to his chest. The other soldiers made fun of it every day. They said it was broken, old, and junk. But it was the only rifle he had, and he spent many nights fixing it by himself because no one else wanted to. The platoon moved forward slowly. The jungle was tight, wet, and hard to walk through. Vines pulled at their uniforms, mud grabbed their boots. It was easy to get stuck, easy to fall, and easy to lose focus, and losing focus could get everyone killed. Carter stopped when he noticed something wrong. The jungle was too quiet. No birds, no bugs, no wind. And he saw fresh cuts on the plants like someone had passed there very recently. He raised his fist, telling everyone behind him to stop. 30 men froze in place. If Carter made a bad call, they would all walk straight into a trap. If he waited too long, the enemy might strike first. And if his repaired M14 failed to fire when he needed it, all of them would be in danger. Carter looked again at the tall grass ahead. That's when he understood. They weren't walking into an ambush. They were already inside one. If you're enjoying the story, hit the like button to support the channel. Specialist Carter was not the kind of soldier people remembered at first glance. He didn't talk much, didn't joke much, and didn't try to be the center of attention. He just did his job quietly. But whenever something broke, anything at all, people called for him. It had become a habit in the platoon. A strap, a broken radio clip, a bent knife, a loose buckle. Give it to Carter. He never said no. He always tried to help even when he didn't have the right tools. That habit is the reason he ended up with the worst M14 in the entire company. When the quartermaster dumped a stack of old rifles on the table, everyone rushed to grab the better ones. The decent rifles were chosen next. The ones with minor problems went after that. And the broken, ugly, useless rifles sat there until the end, until the very last soldier without a weapon stepped forward. That soldier was Carter. The rifle he picked up looked like it had survived a fall from a helicopter. The gas tube was bent, the stock had a long crack, the magazine well was loose, and the rear sight shook when touched. Even the trigger felt wrong. When he shook it, it rattled like parts inside were ready to fall out. A few soldiers laughed right away. Man, that rifle belongs in a museum's trash can. You better pray the enemy dies from fear before you shoot. Can you fix that, Carter? Looks like it's missing half the pieces. But Carter didn't complain. He didn't blame anyone. He simply took the rifle and walked back to his tent like he always did. Quiet, calm, and focused. He sat on the ground and got to work immediately. He didn't have a real workbench. He didn't have proper tools. He didn't have replacement parts. But he had patience, and that was enough for him. He boiled water to heat the gas tube and slowly bent it back with his hands. He used resin, tape, and pressure to close the crack in the stock. He borrowed a tiny screwdriver from a radio kit to tighten the loose sight. He used sandpaper from another soldier to clean the barrel and the outside metal. It took hours, and he wasn't even close to finished. While other soldiers played cards, wrote letters, cleaned their boots, or tried to sleep, Carter kept working under a small flashlight. Bugs flew into his face. Sweat dripped off his chin. His fingers hurt from twisting metal and trying to fix things that were never meant to be fixed in the field. Some soldiers walked by just to laugh. "You're wasting your time, man. That rifle is dead. Just get a new one. It's going to explode when you fire it." But Carter didn't stop. He didn't stop because he knew he didn't have a choice. This was the rifle he had, and this was the rifle he needed to trust with his life. He had seen rifles fail in battle. He had seen what happened when a soldier pulled the trigger and nothing happened. He had heard stories of men who didn't get a second chance. He refused to be one of those stories. Each night he worked on the M14, he learned something new about it. The way the bolt slid, the way the magazine clicked, the way the barrel heated after a few shots. Every detail mattered. He cleaned it until the metal shined. He sanded down the rough parts. He polished the trigger assembly. He made the old stock feel solid again. The rifle still looked ugly, but Carter could tell there was something different now. Something only he seemed to notice. The rifle obeyed him. It didn't jam in training. It fired straight. It felt strong again. Nobody else cared. To them, it was still the broken gun. But the truth was simple. The M14 worked now because Carter made it work. He gave it time. He gave it effort. He gave it everything a soldier could give a weapon. And then came the morning of the patrol that went into the silent part of the jungle. Suddenly, the jokes stopped. Not because the soldiers finally respected him, but because they were scared. Carter was in front. Carter was the first line of defense. Carter was the one who would see the enemy first. And Carter carried the rifle they had mocked for weeks. Now, that rifle wasn't a joke. It was their lifeline. If it jammed, they were done. If it misfired, the enemy would strike first. If it failed, they might not make it out of the jungle alive. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next mission. Carter felt the weight of that responsibility, but he didn't panic. He held the M14 tight, checked the safety, adjusted his grip, and kept moving. He trusted the rifle because he built that trust with his own hands. Deep down, he hoped this would be enough, because in the jungle, things went bad fast. And Carter knew the moment would come when he would have to pull the trigger for real. He didn't know when, but he knew it was coming. Carter kept his eyes on the tall grass. Something was wrong. He could feel it in his stomach. The jungle was too quiet, too still, like it was waiting for something bad to happen. He had just warned the sergeant about the tripwire. One more step and half the platoon would have been blown apart. Everyone froze. Everyone knew they were in danger. Then it happened. A tiny metal sound. Click. Carter didn't think. He reacted. "Down!" he shouted, throwing himself to the ground. 1 second later, the whole jungle exploded with gunfire. Bullets ripped through leaves, bark, branches, everything. Dirt flew into the air. Trees splintered. The sound was so loud, Carter felt it in his chest. The platoon was being hit from 3 sides at once. Front, left, right. A perfect U-shaped ambush. "Contact front, contact left, contact right," someone screamed. Carter saw Private Lewis get hit in the arm and spin backward. Another soldier tripped into the mud, firing wildly because he didn't know where the enemy was. The men behind Carter crawled, slipped, cursed, and tried to find cover, but there was almost none. The enemy had chosen the ground perfectly. Carter pulled himself behind a fallen tree, his heart beating so hard he felt dizzy. Bullets hit the log again and again, throwing wood chips into his face. He raised his M14 and looked for a target. He couldn't see anything at first, only shadows moving fast between bushes. The sergeant crawled next to him, yelling over the gunfire, "Find the machine gun! They're pinning us down!" Carter scanned the tree line. Left, nothing. Right, nothing. Front, there, a muzzle flash. A burst of rounds coming from behind a thick tree. A VC machine gun team. If they kept firing, the entire platoon would be trapped and killed. Carter steadied his M14. He took a breath. His hands were shaking, but he forced them to stop. He squeezed the trigger. Click. His heart almost stopped. But it wasn't a jam. It was the safety. He flicked it off fast. Then he aimed again. Another burst from the enemy machine gun tore through the air, hitting the log just inches from his head. Carter didn't wait. He fired. Boom! The M14 kicked hard into his shoulder, but the shot was strong. Straight. He fired again. Boom! The machine gun fire stopped for half a second. Carter had hit something. Maybe the gunner. Maybe the assistant. The sergeant shouted, "Keep firing, Carter! Keep them down!" Carter fired again and again, each shot pushing the enemy back. Other soldiers saw what he was doing and focused their fire on the same spot. The machine gun tried to start up again, but Carter fired first. Boom! This time the muzzle flash disappeared completely. The VC team had gone silent, but the ambush wasn't over. More shots came from the left, more movement on the right. The enemy was trying to close in. The sergeant yelled, "We need to break out! Carter, cover the left! Don't let them flank us!" Carter rolled to the side, mud covering his arms, and aimed at the left tree line. He saw 3 figures rushing forward with rifles. He fired fast, one shot, then another, and the figures dove back into the bushes. The platoon finally started to move. Some soldiers dragged the wounded, others crawled toward better cover. Everyone depended on Carter's shooting to hold the enemy back. His broken M14, the rifle everyone laughed at, was now the only thing keeping 30 men alive. Carter felt the weight of it. He felt the pressure. He felt his hands shaking again. But he kept firing, kept fighting, kept the platoon alive. And the enemy knew someone on the American side was hitting them hard, because their fire started to change direction. They were aiming for him now. Bullets smashed into the log. Branches fell around him. A round passed so close to his head, he felt the air move. But Carter stayed focused. He had no choice. This was the moment he had repaired the rifle for. This was the moment he trained for. This was the moment that decided if everyone lived or died. He loaded a fresh magazine, slammed it in, and yelled, "Come on, I'm right here!" The fight was far from over, but now the platoon had a chance, because Carter refused to break, and his repaired M14 refused to fail. Gunfire filled the jungle like thunder that didn't stop. The VC were pushing harder now. They knew the Americans were trapped. They wanted to finish the job. Carter knew it too. He kept firing at shadows, muzzle flashes, anything that moved. His shoulder hurt from the recoil. His hands were shaking from adrenaline. His ears rang so loud he could barely hear the sergeant shouting orders. "We need to move," the sergeant yelled. "We can't stay here." But they couldn't move. Not while the enemy kept firing from the ridge in front of them. That ridge was the key. High ground, perfect angle. Whoever controlled that ridge controlled the fight. And up there, hidden behind rocks and trees, Carter spotted something new. A second machine gun team. Bigger, stronger, more dangerous. This wasn't like the first one. This gun was higher up, with a clear view of the whole platoon. If they opened fire, the Americans wouldn't stand a chance. Carter saw the gunner adjusting the weapon. He saw another man feeding the belt. He saw a third man spotting targets. They were seconds away from firing. "Machine gun on the ridge," Carter yelled. The sergeant followed his aim, saw the danger, and swore under his breath. "If that gun fires," the sergeant said, "we're dead." Carter knew what he had to do. He pushed himself behind a stump, took a breath, and held his M14 tight. The ridge was almost too far for a quick shot under this pressure. The enemy was partly hidden by trees, and smoke from gunfire blurred the view. But he had to try. His repaired M14 was steady in his hands. He trusted it. He trusted the sight he had fixed. He trusted the barrel he had cleaned until his fingers hurt. "Carter, take the shot," the sergeant shouted. Carter breathed out slowly. He placed his cheek on the stock. He aimed at the gunner's chest. The ground shook as more bullets hit nearby. A round hit the stump he used for cover. Another round hit the mud inches from his elbow. He ignored everything. He focused. He squeezed the trigger. Boom! The shot echoed loudly, louder than the others. The gunner jerked back and fell sideways. But Carter didn't stop. The assistant gunner grabbed the machine gun to fire anyway. Carter fired again. Boom! The assistant dropped. The belt of ammo spilled to the ground. The third man tried to run. He was fast, dodging between rocks. Carter adjusted his sights and fired a third time. Boom! The man fell and rolled down the side of the ridge. The entire machine gun team was down. For a moment, the first moment in minutes, the enemy fire slowed. The platoon felt the pressure lift just a little. "Good shot, Carter!" the sergeant shouted. "That saved us!" Carter didn't celebrate. He scanned for more threats. His hands were shaking badly now, but he forced them to steady. He loaded another magazine. 20 more rounds. That's all he had left. He checked the ridge again. The machine gun lay silent. The enemy around it had scattered. The platoon behind him began to move, slowly, carefully, trying to break out of the kill zone. Like the video if you want more Vietnam War stories just like this. Every soldier there knew the same thing. If Carter hadn't made those shots, the machine gun would have wiped them out. He didn't feel like a hero. He didn't feel proud. He just felt relieved that his repaired M14 hadn't failed. Not when it mattered. Not when 30 lives depended on it. But the fight wasn't over. The VC were regrouping. Carter could see figures moving through the trees, preparing another push. The sergeant crawled up beside him. "Carter," he said, "we need you again. They're coming from the right now. If they hit us there, we're finished." Carter nodded. No fear, just focus. He gripped his M14 tight. "Point me where you need me," Carter said. The sergeant pointed, and Carter prepared for the next shot. The shot that would decide whether the platoon escaped or died in that jungle. The jungle was still full of gunfire, but something had changed. After Carter dropped the machine gun team on the ridge, the enemy lost their best advantage. They could still shoot, they could still shout, they could still move, but they no longer controlled the battle. Now the Americans had a chance. The sergeant crawled next to Carter, breathing hard. His helmet was scratched, his uniform covered in mud, but his eyes were sharp. "They're shifting right," he yelled. "They're trying to hit our weak side." Carter saw it too. Movement in the trees. Fast shadows. More enemy fighters coming from the right flank, trying to pin the platoon again. If they succeeded, the platoon would be crushed. They were low on ammo. They had wounded. They were stuck in the open. This was the enemy's last chance to win the fight. Carter raised his M14 and moved towards the right side of the formation, crawling through the mud, keeping his head low. Bullets cracked above him, snapping branches, kicking dirt into his eyes. He reached a fallen log and took cover behind it. "Carter, see anything?" a soldier shouted. "Yeah," Carter answered. "A lot." There were at least 10 VC fighters pushing through the jungle, spreading out, trying to circle behind the platoon. Carter could see their shapes between the trees, their rifles held tight, their steps quick and aggressive. One enemy soldier ran forward with a grenade in his hand. Carter didn't wait. Boom! The M14 fired and the soldier fell forward, the grenade rolling out of his fingers and exploding harmlessly behind a rock. Another enemy soldier took his place, firing a burst toward Carter's log. Bark exploded into Carter's face. He lowered his head and waited for the pause in the enemy's fire. The second he heard it, he popped up and fired again. Boom! 2 more shots. 2 more enemy soldiers down. The right side of the platoon finally had breathing room. Men started crawling to better positions. Some dragged wounded behind trees. Others fired short bursts to keep the enemy back. The sergeant shouted, "Keep them off the right! Hold that line!" Carter kept firing, but the enemy was stubborn. More shadows came through the bushes. More movement, more rifles. They weren't giving up. Then Carter saw something worse. A group of VC fighters carrying RPG launchers. 2 of them, moving fast. If they got close enough to fire, the entire platoon could be blown apart in seconds. "RPGs on the right," Carter shouted. 2 of them. Everyone reacted at once. "Take them out," the sergeant yelled. Carter steadied his M14, aimed at the first launcher, and fired. Boom! The man carrying the RPG fell instantly. The second man ducked behind a tree. Carter heard him loading the rocket. He had no time to think, no time to breathe. He just moved. He ran out from behind the log, slid onto his stomach, and aimed under a branch. He fired. Boom! The shot hit the tree. The enemy soldier stumbled out, trying to regain balance. Carter fired again. Boom! The RPG launcher dropped to the ground. The right flank was safe, for now. Behind him, the platoon was fighting harder. Now they were pushing back, not just surviving. Soldiers shouted targets to each other, fired controlled bursts, and moved with confidence they didn't have earlier. The wounded were being treated. The able-bodied were returning fire with everything they had. The sergeant slapped Carter on the shoulder. "You're holding this whole side together," he yelled. "Keep it up." Carter didn't feel like a hero. He didn't feel like he was doing something special. He felt like a soldier doing what he had to do, but he knew one thing for sure. If his M14 hadn't worked, if his repairs had failed, if even one shot had jammed, the platoon would be gone. He reloaded again. Another magazine. Only a few left, but the enemy fire was getting weaker now, scattered, less organized. The Americans were pushing forward inch by inch, breaking out of the kill zone. The ambush was starting to collapse. Then the sergeant yelled, "We've got an opening! Move to the clearing, now!" The platoon began shifting left, heading toward a gap in the jungle that could give them better cover. Carter stayed in the back of the group, covering the retreat, firing at anything that moved. He was the last man to move, the last man firing, the last man holding the line. And as he ran toward the clearing, he realized something. The enemy wasn't chasing. They were falling back. The platoon was winning. The fight was turning in their favor, and the turning point, the moment everything changed, had been the shot from a rifle everyone had mocked. The platoon ran toward the clearing, stumbling through mud and broken branches. They were tired, bleeding, scared, and running low on ammo. But they were still alive, and that alone meant they had a chance. Carter stayed behind the group, firing short, controlled shots to make the enemy think the Americans were still in full force. He didn't shoot wildly. He didn't panic. He aimed at anything that moved and kept the VC guessing. The sergeant shouted, "Keep moving! Don't stop!" Men grabbed wounded soldiers under the arms and dragged them forward. Rucksacks were dropped. Grenades were pulled out just in case. Everyone was focused on reaching that clearing, the only spot where they could reform, reload, and stand together. Carter glanced back and saw the enemy breaking through the tree line again. Not many, but enough. 4, then 6, then more shapes appeared through the smoke. They were regrouping for one final push. Carter yelled, "They're coming again! Move!" He fired 3 fast shots. Boom, boom, one enemy fighter fell. Another ducked. A third kept running. Carter sprinted backward, keeping his rifle raised. His lungs burned. His legs felt heavy. His arms were shaking from firing so many rounds in so little time. But he didn't stop. If he stopped, someone behind him would die. The platoon finally reached the edge of the clearing. A wide open patch of dirt with fallen logs and broken bamboo. Not perfect cover, but better than being trapped in a tight trail. "Carter, get over here!" the sergeant shouted. Carter jumped over a log and slid into position beside the rest of the men. They formed a rough defensive line, pointing rifles at the jungle wall they had just escaped from. Then the jungle moved. Dozens of leaves shook at once. Branches snapped. A shout in Vietnamese echoed across the clearing. The enemy was committing everything. The final attack. The platoon braced themselves. "Steady!" the sergeant yelled. "Wait for them to show." Carter rested his M14 on a fallen tree, breathing hard. His hands were trembling from exhaustion, but he forced them to stay still. Then the enemy burst out of the tree line. 12 fighters, maybe more, charging hard, firing from the hip, shouting loudly. "Engage!" the sergeant roared. The platoon opened fire.
Rifles cracked across the clearing, machine guns rattled, grenades exploded. The air filled with dust and smoke. Carter fired again and again. Boom! Each shot felt heavier than the last. Each shot felt like it drained the rest of his strength. But he kept going. One enemy fighter rushed closer than the rest, only 20 feet away. Carter aimed at his chest and fired. Boom! The man dropped instantly. Another enemy fighter threw a grenade toward the clearing. "Grenade!" someone shouted. Without thinking, Carter aimed and shot the thrower. Before he could pull back into cover, boom! The grenade flew off target and exploded harmlessly to the side. The platoon pushed forward a little, gaining ground, taking control. They were fighting back with everything they had. But then Carter saw something that froze him for a second. A VC squad leader, different uniform, chest rig full of magazines, moving fast, was sneaking around the left side, trying to flank the platoon, trying to shoot the wounded, trying to break the American line. If he reached that position, the platoon would collapse. Carter didn't hesitate. He ran left, jumping over broken bamboo, sliding into a new position. He could barely see through the smoke, but he saw the outline of the squad leader raising his rifle. Carter lifted his M14, but the enemy was already aiming. He didn't have time for a perfect shot. He didn't have time to think. He fired. Boom! The shot hit the squad leader in the chest. He fell backwards into the brush. The left flank was safe. Carter didn't even have time to breathe. Another enemy rushed toward him with a bayonet. Carter swung his rifle, blocked the attack, pushed the man back, and fired.
Point blank. Boom. The recoil slammed into his shoulder, but the threat was gone. Now the enemy was breaking. They weren't charging anymore. They were scattering. The sergeant saw it and shouted with everything he had, "They're falling back. Keep firing. Don't let them reform." The platoon roared with energy. They pushed harder. Rifles fired non-stop. The enemy ran back into the trees, leaving bodies, weapons, and packs behind. 10 seconds later, the firing stopped. No more movement, no more shouting, no more bullets. The jungle went quiet. This time, it wasn't the danger quiet from before. It was the "we survived" quiet. The sergeant walked toward Carter, breathing heavily. "You saved the whole damn platoon," he said. "No question, you saved us." Carter didn't feel like a hero. He felt tired. His arms hurt, his legs shook, and his ears rang. He looked down at his M14, scratched, dirty, smoking, hot as fire. The same rifle the platoon had mocked. The same rifle nobody trusted. The same rifle he repaired alone under a small flashlight. It hadn't jammed. It hadn't misfired. It hadn't failed him once. Carter quietly patted the stock and let out a breath he had been holding for minutes. The platoon was alive because he refused to give up on a broken rifle, because he stayed calm, because he kept fighting, because he didn't quit. And the enemy, once confident they had trapped the Americans, was now gone. The jungle was finally quiet again. No gunfire, no explosions, no shouting, just the heavy breathing of tired men who had fought harder than they ever expected. Some soldiers sank to their knees. Some fell on their backs in the mud. Some looked around in disbelief, like they couldn't understand why they were still alive. Carter stayed standing for a moment, holding his M14 with both hands. It felt heavier now, not because the rifle changed, but because the adrenaline was gone. His arms were shaking, his fingers were stiff. His whole body felt like it had been running for hours. The sergeant walked over, still breathing hard. "Everyone okay?" he shouted. There were groans, coughs, and tired voices. "We've got wounded, but they're alive. We need medics over here. Ammo check. Water. Someone pass the canteens." The platoon was bruised, bleeding, dirty, and exhausted, but alive. Carter finally set his rifle down for a moment. His hands were trembling so much, he had to grip his knees to steady himself. The sergeant pointed at him. "You," he said, "come here." Carter walked forward slowly, feeling every step. The sergeant looked him straight in the eyes. "You saved us," he said, not loud, not dramatic, just simple and real. Carter opened his mouth to reply, but nothing came out. He wasn't used to praise. He wasn't used to anyone noticing him at all. The sergeant continued, "That machine gun on the ridge, that would have torn us apart. Those RPGs on the right, they would have blown us into pieces. And that last push, they would have crushed our wounded." He shook his head. "You stopped all of it." The other soldiers started gathering around, some limping, some holding bandages to their arms or legs, some helping their friends walk. At first, they just stared at Carter, quiet, serious, thinking about what they had just survived. Then Private Lewis, the one who got hit in the arm, stepped forward. He said, "Man, that shot on the RPG guy, you saved my life." Another soldier nodded. "And when they flanked left, you were there before any of us even saw it." A third added, "That broken rifle you fixed, it outshot all of ours." Someone else said, "Hell, Carter, you held half the line by yourself." Carter felt his face warm, not from pride, but from shock. He never expected this. He never wanted attention. He just wanted to stay alive and keep everyone else alive, too. The sergeant put a hand on his shoulder. "You earned more than respect today," he said. "You earned trust." The words hit Carter harder than any bullet ever could. He wasn't used to being trusted. He wasn't used to being the one everyone depended on. But today he had been the difference between life and death. Then the sergeant looked down at the M14. "Bring it here," he said. Carter picked it up and handed it over. The sergeant examined it, the cracked stock, the scratches, the dirt, the heat still coming off the barrel. Then he said aloud, for everyone to hear, "This rifle didn't jam once. It didn't fail. It didn't slow us down. Anyone who made fun of it before, you were wrong." He handed the rifle back to Carter. "This weapon is staying with you," the sergeant said. "No one else gets it. It's yours." The platoon nodded. No one argued. No one joked. No one laughed. Not anymore. One soldier spoke up. "From now on, I'm not laughing at anything Carter fixes." Another added, "If he can fix a rifle like that, he can fix anything." Slowly, the group around him started to relax. Not because the danger was gone, but because the fear had finally released its grip. They had survived something deadly. They had fought together, and they had learned who they could rely on. Carter didn't feel like a hero. He didn't feel special. He was tired. His clothes were soaked with sweat. His knees hurt. His shoulder felt bruised from firing so many rounds. But he felt one thing he had never felt before. He mattered. He had done something real, something important, something that would be remembered. He looked down at his repaired M14, the rifle everyone mocked, and he smiled just a little. Not because he wanted praise, but because he knew he had proven himself. He had proven the rifle. He had proven the work he put into it. And he had proven that no matter how bad things looked, he would not break. The sergeant clapped him on the back. "Rest up, Carter. You earned it." Carter sat down on a fallen log, breathing deeply, letting the quiet sink in. But he knew one thing. This wasn't the end of the mission. This wasn't the end of the war. This was just one day. Tomorrow they would move again. Tomorrow danger would return. Tomorrow he would pick up that same M14 and walk into the jungle again. But now he wouldn't walk alone. Now the platoon walked with him, and they trusted him with their lives. The platoon stayed in the clearing for almost an hour. They treated the wounded, counted ammo, checked weapons, and made sure the enemy wasn't planning a second attack. Every man was tired, dirty, and shaking from what had just happened, but they were alive. 30 men walked into that jungle. 30 men were walking out. As they prepared to move again, Carter sat quietly on the same log where he had rested earlier. His M14 was across his lap. The barrel was scratched. The stock was cracked. The metal was stained with dirt and sweat. but it had done its job. For the first time since he arrived in Vietnam, Carter took a moment to think about everything that had just happened. He didn't feel brave. He didn't feel strong. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt grateful that his repairs had worked, grateful that his shots had been true, grateful that the platoon had listened when he yelled warnings, grateful that he hadn't failed the men who trusted him. The sergeant walked over and sat beside him. "You know," the sergeant said, "war does strange things to people. It scares some, it freezes others, but a few men, it turns them into something stronger." Carter didn't respond. He didn't know what to say. The sergeant continued, "Today you didn't fight for medals. You didn't fight for praise. You fought because the man next to you needed you. That's what matters." He nudged Carter's shoulder. "And that rifle? It's part of you now." Carter looked down at the M14. He remembered the nights spent fixing it under weak light. He remembered the jokes, the laughter, the doubts from everyone around him. He remembered how many times he wondered if he should just give up. But he didn't, and that decision had saved lives. The sergeant stood up and called for the platoon to form up. "On your feet, we've got a long walk back." Carter stood slowly. His legs were heavy but steady. His hands still shook a little, but he held his M14 firm. As the platoon formed a loose column, soldiers passed by him one by one. Some nodded, some saluted, some simply patted his shoulder as they walked past. No one laughed at him anymore. No one joked about the rifle. No one questioned his place in the platoon. He had earned something rare in war: respect. As they started marching out of the clearing, the jungle felt different. The danger was still there. It always was. But the fear wasn't crushing anymore. The men walked with more confidence, more unity, more trust in each other. Carter walked near the front, not by mistake, not because someone forced him, but because the platoon wanted him there. He scanned the jungle like before, watching for movement, listening for danger. But now every man behind him knew something. If trouble came again, Carter would be ready. His M14 would be ready, and the platoon could follow him without fear, because he had already proven something no one expected. A quiet man with a broken rifle could stand in the worst place possible, under the worst conditions, against the worst odds, and not only survive, but save everyone else. As the platoon disappeared back into the trees, the camera of this story would follow them from behind, watching their silhouettes fade into the jungle haze. And the narrator, calm, steady, documentary-like, would say, "In every war, there are battles men never forget, moments that reveal strength no one knew they had." Specialist Carter's stand in that clearing became one of those moments, a reminder that courage doesn't always come from the loudest voice or the strongest body. Sometimes it comes from the soldier who refuses to give up. On his rifle, on his mission, on his brothers. Fade out. Subscribe and turn on notifications to follow the next chapter.